as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live on YouTube, too, at the Team 980. And we have absolutely massive news that just broke to start the show. Anthony, please. The Washington Commanders have just made a trade with the Houston Texans for Laramie Tunsil. Yeah. Laramie Tunsil is going to be the starting left tackle for the Commanders. That obviously will move Brandon Coleman likely inside. It could kick him all the way over to right tackle. We will have plenty of time to go through that. In exchange for Tunsil, there is a quote-unquote draft pick haul. That is the phrasing that I've seen from both Ian Rappaport and Adam Schefter. So Laramie Tunsil on his way to Washington. And that's not how we thought we were going to start the show, because literally when the time Russell's show ended, that hadn't happened yet. That happened in the 4 minutes in between our shows. I can also tell you more on the breaking news front. Diana Rossini from The Athletic reporting that former Commander safety Jeremy Chin is signing with the Raiders. So, man, this is enormous. Let's deal with the Laramie Tunsil thing first. Laramie Tunsil, 2 years ago, and kind of going back the previous couple of years before that, was arguably the best left tackle in all of football. That is not an overstatement. I would still take Trent Williams, but of the short list of guys that were on Trent's level, Laramie Tunsil was one of them. Last year, he was not very good because the Texans' offensive line was an unmitigated disaster in terms of how they were deploying their guys. But Tunsil is 30 years old. He's 6'5", 313 pounds. He has been fairly reliable over the course of his career, both obviously in his play and in his availability. And he has been absolutely exceptional for most of it. We're talking about a guy that going back to 2018, his third year in the league, has graded out on PFF in the green every single year. And he has been the single best pass blocker multiple years by PFF's metric. Again, PFF is what it is. It's not perfect, but it's the best we got. And he has consistently graded in the high 80s or low 90s for the entirety of his career. In fact, last year compared to his previous years, he was actually better against the run. He's graded out at a 74 on PFF against the run. The Commanders are going all in. And that is very, very clear. I am very curious to see what the pick package is here. This is a fairly tackle-weak draft. So my guess is the Commanders looked at this, and here's what I'll say. If they gave up the 29th pick in this draft, and that's all they gave up, I don't mind this deal. If you're telling me that essentially the 29th pick is going to turn into a guy who might be the best left tackle in football for the next 3-4 years, then that is a trade that I am perfectly worth making. Yes, he's going to cost more than a draft pick will, but he's way better, and especially he's way better right now than anyone else you could possibly get at that position. Not to mention, this could kick Brandon Coleman inside. That shores up your left guard spot, or he plays right guard until Sam Cosmi comes back. Or he plays right tackle, and that's probably an upgrade in the long term over Andrew Wiley. But this all just makes your offensive line that much better. And it allows Jaden to do all the things that you want Jaden to do. They eventually need to make sure that they have some level of draft capital to spend. This is a team that wanted to build through the draft, and I'm not holding them to that if they wanted to change plans, but there's a reason that the best teams build through the draft. You have to be able to raise guys in-house. And that said, trading for players is definitely a way you're going to get better players than signing in free agency, because the best players do not get to free agency. And so with Tunsil, you're taking a little bit of a risk. You're buying the dip. But I also don't know just how big of a dip it is based off of the price. Still just refreshing constantly to see what we can...
I got the terms.
The terms. Okay, here we go. All right, I got them too. Diana Rossini, The Athletic. Washington receives Tunsil and a fourth this year. So the Commanders did not have their fourth this year. Now they are back in the fourth round. The problem is they're now out of the third round. So they get a 2025 third. So that's essentially the Jahan Dotson pick. 2025 seventh, they had 2. And now they've given up their second and fourth next year. Whew, that's a lot of picks. It's spread out over 2 years. The third and the seventh is whatever. The third and next year's second and next year's fourth. That hurts a little bit. But I guess you also have time to make other deals. You also have time to trade back. You know, if the Commanders are looking at this draft saying we are going to hopefully trade out of the first round, maybe they've already had discussions with teams saying, hey, we're going to trade out of the first round. We can get a future second back next year. Can you trade from 29 to 38 for this year? Or obviously, you get this year's second. You're going from 29 to 38 and a second next year from a team that might not be that good. You have to think ahead. And that's one thing that I have definitely learned about how general managers think across sports is nothing happens in a vacuum, right? None of these moves that the Commanders are making, whether it be Javon Kinlaw, whether it be Laramie Tunsil, whether it be any other move that they make, are happening in a vacuum. They are thinking about how they are building a roster and a team in totality. How do we spend our money? How do we spend our draft capital? What timeline are we trying to be good on? And how do we acquire the talent that we want to acquire based off of the market available? Do we have the options in the draft? Do we have the options in free agency? Or do we need to make trades? Because the thing is about draft versus trade specifically, not draft versus free agency. And this is not a full-throated endorsement of this move. I am still very much processing this in real time. This happened as I was preparing to walk into the studio in the 4 minutes between the time that Russell's show ended and my show started. I have watched zero. Actually, the funny thing is Anthony and I were sitting in my prep studio watching Javon Kinlaw tape. I was ready to go with my Javon Kinlaw takes. Obviously, we will get to those as we go, as well as I think Logan's going to check in at 6 o'clock. I'm going to give him some time to watch some of Tunsil on tape. Like, we're going to get to all of it. But on a big picture, the point of draft picks is to get good players. End of story. And whether you actually draft that player, which is essentially a lottery ticket, or you use a draft pick to say, hey, other team, we realize that the player you're going to give us is more expensive than if we had simply used this draft pick, or in this case, draft picks. But we are guaranteeing we're taking a good player. So we are willing to give up the capital and pay that player more. Simply because we are now taking the guessing out of it. Now, does it work every time? Of course not. There are guys that switch systems, switch teams, and it just never works. But at the end of the day, Laramie Tunsil 2 years ago was arguably the best left tackle in football. And so what you're betting on is that no matter how you use these picks that you are giving up, and again, Washington is giving up a second next year, a fourth next year, and then a third and a seventh this year. They get a fourth back in return, as well as left tackle Laramie Tunsil from the Houston Texans. That package of picks would not get more talent on your team over the next couple of years than just simply saying, Laramie Tunsil, you're the talent. And on that level, I get it. Because the Commanders have a window here where Jaden Daniels is going to be making an extremely low amount of money compared to the production that you are getting from him. Again, you got quarterbacks that are signing for basically $60 million a year. And in 2025, Jaden Daniels is going to count $8.57 million against the cap. You have, compared to your production, an extra $50 $1.5 million to spend, you have room to overpay for some guys. Because even if you were to get, let's say a $20 million player and you only get $18 million of production, when you can afford that inefficiency, it's worth it compared to a lot of teams that are paying the quarterback and are like, we have to shop in the $5 million bin and hope we get $7 million of production. Efficiency, sure. But ultimately, you're looking at output. And the Commanders are making some bets on some guys that have had historically great output, that they can regain some of that form and output themselves to one game farther than they did last season, where the Commanders were in the NFC Championship game and are now very clearly trying to get to the Super Bowl. We'll have much more reaction, including your calls at 301-230-0980. The Commanders have traded for Laramie Tunsil. We're reacting live on the Hoffman Show. right, coming up for Not My Beat today, we're going to have my pal Landry Locker from our sister station, 610 Sports in Houston. And Anthony, he just said, Laramie Tunsil, he's the opposite of Trent Williams, is the tease I'll give. I don't even know what that means.
Yeah, is that a good thing, a bad thing? Like,
I don't know. I have no idea if Landry's a Laramie Tunsil fan or if he's a Laramie Tunsil not fan. I don't know. But I know a lot of people like Laramie Tunsil a lot.
I was about to say, it sounds like we got swindled or something, man. Like, he's the opposite of Trent Williams.
Yeah, I don't want the opposite of Trent Williams.
Me either.
Because Trent Williams is like the best left tackle ever, and I don't want the worst left tackle ever. So I guess we'll figure out what he means at 5. Logan will have his thoughts at 6 o'clock. We're definitely gonna have Logan on now. We were debating, depending on how the news was going and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, honestly, can we just do a full live take command at 6 o'clock and go to the end of the hour?
Man,
I've thought about doing that many times. We might do it today. So Logan's going to be with us for a while, hopefully, at 6 o'clock. So here's where we're at with Tunsil contractually. For now, I wonder if they extend him. Laramie Tunsil is going to make, just looking at the details here, it looks like he's going to make 21.3 this year against the cap and the same next year. I sincerely wonder if he wants an extension. And if you're Washington, you're probably going to give that to him. But he is scheduled to make 21 against the cap. And like, look, if you are getting for reference, Anthony, Andrew Wiley's going to make 10 this year. So like, that's where the numbers are. And like, let me just look up Trent real quick, because I do believe Trent Williams is the highest paid tackle in football, and Trent is making against he's got one of these complicated deals, so I got to scroll. Trent is scheduled to make 21 this year. He's scheduled to make 39 next year. Obviously, they'll restructure that and figure that out, or pray that he retires. But just to give you an idea, like top tackles are going to cost you a little bit more than what the Commanders are going to be able to get Laramie Tunsil for, because he is a guy that signed a contract extension a couple years ago. So, woo! Feel like we're sprinting.
Man.
I already worked out today. If I had known, I would have saved my heart rate raising.
They're making moves,
man.
I
should have known. So, yeah, that's where we're at. The Commanders, in case you're just tuning in, the breaking news here on the show. I said the breaking news here on the Anthony, I was trying to get my breaking news sounder, not yours, but sure. Okay, cool. Good to know my fancy buttons aren't working. Laramie Tunsil is coming to the Commanders. He's been traded from the Houston Texans to Washington, along with a 4th-round pick for a package of 4 picks, including a 3rd this year and a 2nd in 2026. I think the other interesting thing about this, like perusing the internet in the break, is a lot of people, Anthony, are looking at this trade not through the Washington side, but they're looking at it from the Houston side, and they're like, what the actual word are the Texans doing? They were the worst team last year, offensive line-wise, in the entire league, arguably, and they still made the playoffs. And now they're trading their star left tackle. Seems absolutely insane. A lot of their problems were structural, not personnel. And I still don't really understand what they're doing here. Maybe Landry has more insight on that when he joins us at 5 o'clock, but it's definitely a head scratcher. I mean, maybe they just think structurally they can do some other stuff, and, they maybe have a target in the draft that they think is a little more realistic. If you're Washington, do you feel that you can get a tackle at 29? I also think it's interesting because they were so not adamant, but like Brandon Coleman played pretty well at left tackle. In fact, last year I saw numbers from Aaron Schatz of Football, or I guess he's not with Football Outsiders anymore. I think he's with ESPN now, but he founded Football Outsiders. ESPN pass rush win rates last year. Coleman 90.3% against pass, 79% against run. Laramie Tunsil 93% pass, 74.6% run. So they were closer on that particular statistic than you would think that Tunsil and Coleman were. But I think later in the year, the performance of Coleman probably made them go, man, if we can turn this third-round pick into a, really, really, really good guard, or we can kind of live with him and always wonder at tackle, is it worth it just going to push him inside to guard? And then once you can get the guaranteed tackle play in Tunsil, and now your offensive line becomes a strength. And especially when you're dealing with the Eagles and Jalen Carter, you got a Diggy Zua and Micah down in Dallas. And then, the Giants have a couple guys that are really good too, including Leonard Williams inside. I kind of understand the move here from Washington to say, what's the strongest version of our offensive line? Is it Coleman outside or trying to bring in help inside, or is it the other way around, kicking Coleman inside and having some help outside? I think this is probably the correct answer.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting if you bump, Coleman inside for all the reasons you just mentioned. But I even look at, what the Eagles have on their offensive line. I just think we just got so much bigger up front, and we've seen how, dominant an offensive line can be when you have those stout individuals up front. Like, I think we're building up the trenches just like Adam Peters and the 49ers did in the past, and I think this move right here was one of those moves that sort of kind of solidifying what AP is trying to build here.
For sure. So the other move that happened that I'm going to mention real quick before we get to the calls at 301-230-0980, I will get to Javon Kinlaw as well in the next half hour because that was obviously the biggest news that we thought was going to be on the show today, but news that has been breaking as things go down today. Jeremy Chinn is going to the Raiders. It's a 2-year deal. I actually didn't see the terms. Did you see the terms on that? I don't think it was very much based off what I saw. I'm sure someone in the YouTube comments will quickly give me those if Anthony or I can't find them expeditiously. But let's see. 2-year deal with the Raiders.
It just says 2-year deal over 6 TMs.
Okay, so 75 fully guaranteed at signing. So that's probably like a 17-ish change with let's say $10 million guaranteed this year between salary and signing bonus and then some guaranteed money in the second year. I'm kind of surprised they didn't pay that, to be honest. And I'm kind of surprised they let him out the door. But I also wonder if they want someone back there who is more apt in coverage. And Chinn did a lot of really great stuff. I think he's good against the run. I think he played well in coverage at times. But if they want to be able to man up a little bit more and have someone who's a little more reliable on tight ends, I kind of wonder what the plan is there. And, someone asked in the YouTube chat, for instance, can Percy Butler play there? I don't think so. I was not very impressed with the season that Percy Butler had last year. I just thought he made a lot of mistakes. And I think that some of his, he's a very, very good special teams player and he's really fast. He's got a lot of great traits, but that doesn't make you a great football player. Maybe they think that in an expanded role, he'd be okay. Or maybe for all we know, they're working on Javon Holland, the Dolphin safety. But I do kind of wonder who the plan is there because a lot of people have obviously said Tafunga. He is not on the table. He signed with the Broncos. But there are some good DBs on the market, and I do wonder kind of what the plan is at safety with Chinn getting out the door. I was kind of surprised that he didn't sign before that he got to free agency. Once he did, I was like, do they not want to bring him back? So we will definitely continue to monitor the safety situation as well with Washington. All of a sudden, that is a hole that they have to fill that we didn't necessarily plan on. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. We'll get to your calls, and I'll sneak in a couple of thoughts on Javon Kinlaw as well next on The Hoffman Show. What a day as the Commanders have made a monster trade. They made a couple of moves in free agency earlier. Really, they started it last week. Bobby Wagner. They re-signed Zach Ertz this weekend. They re-signed John Bates late last night. Woke up to that news this morning. And then they opened free agency signing Javon Kinlaw. Oh, by the way, Tressway also back. Praise be. Javon Kinlaw, 3 years, $45 million, 30 guaranteed. We'll get into him as we go. I've watched a little bit of his tape. Very interesting player, especially for the deal. A guy that Adam Peters is very familiar with. A guy, by the way, I think it's worth mentioning purely on a character standpoint. Robert Saleh, after having him in San Francisco, brought him to New York, and now Adam Peters has been like, I want you with me in Washington. So this is a guy that's very well liked. As a player, I think the idea of Javon Kinlaw has always been a little bit better than the reality of Javon Kinlaw. But Dan Quinn is also very smart and is very good at using guys in specific roles. So I definitely have some ideas. Definitely some ideas there on Kinlaw, but we'll get into it as we go. All right, let's get your thoughts, though, on the Laramie Tunsil trade. If you are just tuning in, the Commanders have traded a package of 4 draft picks, a third this year, a second next year, the highest amongst them, for Laramie Tunsil, Texans left tackle. He is also coming back with a 4th-round selection in this year's draft. Marcus, let's get us started. Marcus, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show.
What's going on, Hoffy? How are we feeling today?
Feeling good, man. Feeling good. Feeling energized. Like, this is nuts. This is fun. This is why radio is still king, Marcus. We're live.
I love it, man. Let AP cook. Oh, my goodness. Like, quality over quantity, man. Like, it's like walking on eggshells dealing with AP, but you know when he strikes, it's going to hit hard, man. It's going to hit hard. I will compare this trade very, very loosely to the Deebo Samuels trade in this regard. Getting a Laramie Tunsil makes your entire offensive line better. Like, it makes the group better. You have guys that are already good, but they may be better at other positions, but you won't know unless you get a guy that's really great at his position, and then you can start moving things around. Like, this is he like frustrates me. AP frustrates me because he's like a methodical genius. Like, I love what he's doing. I just hate the fact that we have to wait, but I buckle up, man. This week's gonna be crazy. I feel like this week is gonna be crazy. That's why I'm not really that concerned about what we're doing with Jeremy Chinn. Like, I'm sad to see him go, but AP's cooking up something. I don't know what it is yet, and I hate having to wait for it, but I need my entree, AP. I need you to get on that. But, look, man, I'm excited for it.
I mean, Marcus, I don't know how much bigger of an entree you're going to get than Laramie Tunsil, who's one of the best 5 tackles in football. Like, your entree is Laramie Tunsil. I think the hard thing is, like, we just don't know how it's going to play out in the long term, which we didn't know last year. I think last year a lot of people were like, I hate these moves. And then they wound up going to the NFC Championship game. And we now have, like,
everybody loves them.
Right. And it's like we can laugh at Shane and Oxon Hill in that call forever, right? It's like, this guy sucks, this guy sucks, this guy's like, well, they went to the NFC Championship game, so who sucks after all? This year,
I feel like, man, and it's like,
this year it's just different. It's like, okay, now it's a bunch of names that we know. They're doing big swings. And now we're like, we think this is good, but, like, we don't know. And that's every team in the NFL, by the way.
It is, but it's like you can only trust. I don't like you really can only trust him at this point. Like, you saw what he did last year, and you see that he's making moves that aren't just like random. So, like, we needed an upgrade at left tackle. We have a potential franchise. Well, not a potential. He's a franchise player in Houston, and now we have him here. So it's like he's making the moves that make sense. It's like quality moves. That's why I'm excited, man. I don't know what he's got cooking next, but I'm hungry. I'm hungry for more. I love it. I love it.
Marcus, thanks for the call, dude. Always appreciate it. Let's go to Gary from Upper Marlboro. Gary, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show, sir.
Hey, Craig. Anytime you can make a move to get a top 3 or 4 player at his position, I think you have to be excited about him. He definitely improves your team. The only concern that I have is, why would Houston give this guy up when they have a similar situation with a young quarterback that was coming off a great rookie year that exceeded all expectations? Why would you give up a guy? I don't know if they have salary cap problems, but it always shakes my confidence. You know, back when we got Donovan McNabb. Why would Philadelphia give up Donovan McNabb? Now, he wasn't at the level that Laramie Tunsil is right now. But you always wonder why teams trade a relatively young superstar for any reason. So I'm anxious to hear why they did that. But he definitely upgrades the team. And Philadelphia has been weakened this year today. I think Washington upgraded them. So I don't know. I'm not so big on the defensive tackle. But I am, you can't be anything but excited about getting a left tackle of the quality of Laramie Tunsil. I mean, I don't know what happened last year. I didn't follow Houston, but like you said, the year before, I mean, this guy was lights out and everybody knew it. So only question I have is, why did they give him up? They did give up potentially 3 starters with a second, third, and a fourth round pick. But I think you play this year by year with Jaden until you get to the point where you're going to have to pay him. And he's definitely an upgrade, no question about it. So, and you got to trust Adam in free agency and these types of things. He can spot talent that has been on the field. Again, I still question his drafting a little bit, but Laramie Tunsil definitely upgrades and he improves the team. So I'm in favor of it.
Yeah, Gary, thanks for the call. And I think that's a totally fair question. And I actually think that the last part that what Gary said is going to help determine the success here. One of the things I've been thinking about the Commanders and building forward for this year is, let's say they want to play a little more coverage at times. Like, what's the role Dominique Hampton plays in that? Like, Dominique Hampton, why do I remember that name? Remember they drafted him last year and then basically gave him a redshirt year as they converted him from safety to linebacker. And so they bring back Luvu, obviously, because he was on a multi-year deal. They bring back Bobby, who is Bobby freaking Wagner, but has some limitations in coverage. Are there packages where maybe Dominique Hampton's out there, probably with Bobby? Like, he's not a Mike linebacker, but if he's playing off-ball linebacker in certain passing situations where maybe Luvu's playing end and he's like true defensive end, and then Dominique Hampton is playing behind him as a linebacker and like kind of a hybrid role. If they hadn't spent the season converting him, then maybe I'd be like, he's your Jeremy, or in the mix to replace Jeremy Chin. That would feel a little aggressive in year 2 for a guy that didn't play and they just switched his position so he's not a safety anymore. But like, those are the kinds of things I'm thinking about for some of these draft picks that didn't pan out last year. In year 1, to say like, okay, later round picks, and frankly, even a guy like Ben Sinnott. Like, if Sinnott works out in the long term, it's fine. And obviously, the 2024 draft is going to be a home run forever, no matter what, because Jaden is Jaden. But I do think that like some of these late round picks where Adam has been great in the past, he's shrunk his margin of error in the draft tremendously, because now you go from a bunch of lottery tickets to, hey man, we kind of got to win the lottery on a couple of these to fill out the roster. Because one thing that, while we talk about the rookie quarterback contract, eventually you do need other guys. Like 3-4 years down the line, you're going to need rookie guys. And maybe you just say, we'll deal with that problem then. But you don't want to have Jaden surrounded by nothing in a couple of years. Like, you need other young guys to grow with him. You want to be able to rebuild in 3 years from now when you have to pay Jaden by hopefully extending some of your guys early in the way that Philadelphia has. So there's a lot of moving pieces here. There is a fair amount of risk to this strategy. But the one thing I'll say about both the Tunsil trade and the Kinlaw move even is we can quibble about the price, and I think that's fair, and how you manage your assets is 100% part of being a general manager in football, but there's no doubt both guys make the football team better. And if you were in the NFC Championship game and you're able to honestly look yourself in the mirror and say, we're better than the team that was in the NFC Championship game last year, that means you're legitimately competing for the Super Bowl, and not just to be in it, but to win it. And at some point, that reality has to matter more than what happens 3 years from now. If you have a Lombardi trophy, well, you worry about that then with a big smile on your face going, hey, at least we got a Lombardi trophy. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. More of your calls next. the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We're streaming live on YouTube too at the Team 980, where we are having pretty much a record viewership kind of day. I wonder why. Oh, it's because the Commanders are making moves. They've traded for Laramie Tunsil, Houston Texans, now former Houston Texans tackle. We'll get back to your calls at 5 o'clock, but we got time now to catch up with my old pal Landry Locker. Worked together down in Dallas. He's made his way down to Houston. I'm here now, and we reunite, Landry, to talk about perhaps the biggest trade that's going to get made all day. When we were texting, you're like, man, I can tell you about the Laramie Tunsil experience. Tell me and the audience about the Laramie Tunsil experience.
One, I think it's kind of a unique one in Houston, but the best way that I would describe Laramie Tunsil is I think he's a good player. I would say he's a top tackle, but I think this is something that your audience can relate to. He's the opposite of Trent Williams, and by that I mean Trent Williams. I mean, you covered him, so I don't want to speak on this. There could be something to it, but it always seems like they said that, like in Washington, he was kind of the alpha in the locker room. He was kind of the voice. A lot of like holding other people accountable and stuff like that. Laramie Tunsil is kind of he's good, but he's not really he's just gonna do his own thing, and it was kind of a unique situation in Houston because the manner in which he got here. It was a trade that was very, very steep. Bill O'Brien was functioning as if, his days were numbered, and they were. And when he got to Houston, he basically had the organization by the balls. And I think that kind of bled into the D'Amico experience to where I don't want to say he was a bad influence on other guys on the offensive line, but I don't think he was a good influence because I don't think everyone can move like Laramie Tunsil and be effective. So I think this is kind of a move where the Texans are getting out proactively before Tunsil is due for a next contract, and they'll have Will Anderson and C.J. Stroud to pay. And I also think it's just a complete re-shifting of the culture of one of the NFL's worst offensive lines.
So that was going to be my next question is like, there is a little bit, I don't want to say buyer beware here, but there's a little bit of like, wait, why did we get this guy? Because he's one of the best, like when he's playing at his best, which 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago he was. Last year, as you well know, the Texans' entire offensive system was a nightmare. He's one of the best 3, 5 certainly, best left tackles in football, on the field, snap in, snap out. So why would Houston, whose offensive line struggled so mightily last year, make him available? Is it more contractual, or is it like the culture thing, and how much of the culture, if it's that, is specific to Houston, where if he gets a fresh start somewhere else in a locker room with a Bobby Wagner and a Zach Ertz, that he might be just fine?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's definitely a little bit of both. I think he's going to be walking into a situation in Washington where, they're one of the more popular teams in the league right now. They've got something going. They've got some leadership, and he's going to kind of have to find his way there, and he's not going to be asked to be one of the faces of the franchise. I don't think he wants to be a face of the franchise. Now, he does. I mean, I think he likes like the lifestyle that comes with being the highest paid. I think the most proud that I've seen him when he was here was, getting to celebrate, as he would say, the 2-time highest paid offensive lineman in NFL history twice. But I do think that there was just an awkward vibe with the offensive line here, where he was kind of doing his thing and they were doing theirs. And D'Amico Ryans always talks about iron sharpening iron and all that. That's one of his go-tos. And my question always with Laramie Tunsil was, if iron sharpens iron, what's the opposite of that? And how much, if you're going to say that, then how much does that matter? I always kind of compare Tunsil here to a guy that you play pickup basketball with, that his team always loses 15-8, but he's always talking about how he scored all 8 points. And I don't know if that is something that goes to Washington, but that was just kind of the vibe here with when Tunsil was doing what he was doing, and he was taking care of his business. I mean, the fall starts, they frustrate a lot of fans. but he's a really good pass blocker. Not a great run blocker, but not awful. But I just think it was time for a change, and I think every factor that we mentioned is kind of comes into play with this decision.
So his play, Landry Locker, 610 Sports in Houston, with us here on the Hoffman Show. His play last year specifically, how much of it was a potential drop-off or any kind of physical thing with him versus the accumulation of mental versus just like Bobby Slowick did a bad job?
I would say his personal play was actually fine. I didn't see anything really bad with his personal play. I mean, he was still doing a good job run blocking. I don't think personally his play fell off. I just think the offensive line as a whole, you can factor in Bobby. They were just really, really bad, and there wasn't no one was really elevating their play. I think you can make a case that he had influence on a couple of the guys, and I don't think it was like an evil influence or anything like that, or like a proactively negative influence, but I just think they kind of copied the wrong things, because I don't think everyone can move like Tunsil. Like Tunsil you can go to his YouTube. He has like a Protect the Tree YouTube. He basically has like 4 guys who work for him, and he's into fashion and all that type of stuff. I've always enjoyed interviewing him and whatnot, but I think he has the God-given ability to where he can move like that. I think there were a couple guys on this offensive line who don't have that ability, that were kind of copying the wrong things when it came to Laramie Tunsil. They were trying to be extra cool, and they don't do that. I will say this though, he's always in shape, so it's not like he's going to come in shape. I would anticipate that he's probably going to want a new deal, but there's that. But yeah, he moves a certain way that he's able to move. And I don't know that everyone on the offensive line has the God-given ability to be able to do that.
So it's funny you say that, and you made the Trent Williams comparison. I'm going to update your Trent Williams file. That actually sounds exactly like Trent Williams, because there were times that like Trent could. And Trent, the other thing about Trent, and I'd be curious about this part. Last thing for you, because I know you got a live stream show that you're doing here in 5 minutes. Like Trent was also so absurdly smart about the game. Trent didn't need to study. And I don't say that in like, he's so gifted he could make up for it. He would see things once and just be like, I got it. And he like didn't understand how other people just didn't get certain things. I remember there was one guy who had like a false start issue one year, and he's like, I don't understand how Duke can't remember the snap count. Like that literally never happens. Like what are we doing? And so it just, football came and still comes at 36 so naturally to Trent Williams that if anybody else tries to be Trent Williams, it's not going to work. And it sounds like and Trent, like, he's pretty swaggy and all that kind of stuff too. So it kind of sounds like Laramie Tunsil is very similar to Trent in those regards.
Yes. It's kind of like, and yeah, I don't even know that Laramie cares enough to get frustrated about it. That's the other thing. Like, I think Trent might at least like get ticked off at the guy. I don't know. Maybe not. You could tell me, but I don't even know that Laramie cares enough to like even really get upset if guys aren't doing their job. He really just wants to handle his own business. But the Washington culture, the Dan Quinn and all that, it will be interesting. Laramie, he was here before D'Amico and stuff, so it was just an interesting dynamic with Tunsil. But hey, when you have a quarterback on a rookie deal, these are the type of moves you make. And I don't think, from a Washington point of view, I don't think it's a bad move, but I think it's a good move for Houston as well. Two teams can win trades.
Yeah,
that does happen.
100%. And it's definitely going to be interesting when they get him into this culture. I mean, as long as he cares about his business, that's a start. If he didn't care at all, that'd be a non-starter. And I do think it's interesting because there is the Adam Peters, D'Amico connection from San Francisco. Like, DQ's very well respected in kind of the Kyle Shanahan circles. So there's no doubt that there was some real conversations there. And then we'll see. We'll see how this works out on both ends. Landry, appreciate it, sir. Have a great rest of your day doing whatever live stream you're doing with whatever chaos is about to unfold for us here in NFL Free Agency.
Yes, sir.
All right, that's Landry Locker. Yeah, thanks, dude. Landry Locker with us here on the Hoffman Show. All right, so that is the report from Houston. Definitely some star quality, for better or for worse, but If he's going to come in shape, he plays really well. Do a lot worse than that for a top 5 caliber left tackle. We'll get back to your calls, and we'll see what Logan thinks coming up at 6 o'clock as well. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. Hour number 2 of the Hoffman Show here on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. 6 o'clock hour is basically going to be a live edition of Take Command. Logan's going to hop on. We're going to talk about Tunsil. We'll talk about Kinlaw. We'll talk about Bates, Ertz coming back as well with our resident tight end, Logan Paulson. So that's coming up at 6 o'clock. This hour is yours, 301-230-0980. We can get into anything you want on the Commanders free agency front. That includes, obviously, the big trade that Washington has made. Laramie Tunsil going to the Commanders in exchange for 4 draft picks, a 2025, a.k.a. this year, 3rd and 7th, next year's 2nd and 4th. You get a 4th back this year as well. So that is the big deal. Also, Javon Kinlaw, 3 years, $45 million, basically 2 for 30 are the guarantees. Other news of note today, Jeremy Chin is headed to Las Vegas. De'Ami Brown, a 1-year, $10 million deal for the Jaguars, for the former Commanders receiver. That's a bummer. I would have paid that. But also get that there's only so much money to go around, and that's a pretty good payday for a guy who performed very well late in the year, but didn't necessarily crush it all year long, and obviously had a pretty rough first 3 years here in D.C. Let's get to the phones, 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Let's start off with Jason. Jason, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show.
What's going on, Craig? I am liking this trade that we did for a tackle. And I like the Kinlaw move. And I always tell people when it comes to cliches, the cliche that's in football that is, about the most accurate is if you dominate the line of scrimmage on each facet of the game, you got a greater chance to win. And that's where I feel like we got better at with these moves, and that's where we needed to go to get better at. And I wish people would just, listen to people who know more than them, like you guys, you and Logan and John Kime and Nikki Javala, because you guys know stuff and y'all listen to people that know more than y'all, and y'all report to us. And it was already kind of known that this class wasn't going to be a big-time free agent class, but I feel like people want to go big fish hunting, and there was no big fish to really hunt out there. So I like the approach. It feels like there's a plan going on because that is a lot of picks to give up, but it feels like this wasn't a knee-jerk reaction like the tackles, were being signed, and this happened. This feels like there's definitely a plan going on coming up with the draft. Feels like this is a trade back situation where we can accumulate more picks to recoup what we kind of lost with the Laramie Tunsil trade. But all in all, I'm feeling good. I feel like we're going in the right direction. I trust this front office. This is not like the old regime where they probably would have overspent on everybody and not have any production for it. So I feel great about this and like the show and keep doing your thing. But we're in the right direction. This is good. This is good and methodical.
Thanks, Jason, for the call. And I do think that's an important point that Jason makes there, that, this is a work in progress. And ultimately, we're not going to judge how this all works out till years from now, unless they win a Super Bowl. And we're talking about the Super Bowl champion Washington Commanders in 2025, and we go into free agency 2026 being like, well, everything's justified. They won a championship. But ultimately, years from now, we'll understand how this all worked out. But at the very least, if we're judging the offseason, we should at least wait to see what the big picture is. We should at least wait to see, okay, training camp is now around the corner. All the moves are done. They've moved the money around. They've done the drafting. They've traded back or not, because there are no guarantees. They might have the idea that, we want to trade back out of 29 and recoup some draft capital. That doesn't mean they're actually going to be able to. But they can't not make this move until draft day, then do it. It's too late. Laramie Tunsil there might have been other offers. And so I think you have to just kind of evaluate, obviously we're live. This is live radio, live YouTube streaming, live everything. That's how this works. We only have the information we have right now. But if we want to be smart about this, we at the very least have to say these are the possible options moving forward. And as much as I think it's simpler to be like, this good, this bad. Sometimes this stuff is kind of in the gray. And, like, I'll admit, like, the Javon Kinlaw thing is risky. I don't love his tape watching the little bit that I watched. I know that there's some better tape out there. Apparently, he played really well the last 3 games of last year, so I'm going to go try to watch some of that later. I also was watching him just against the run. He's better against the pass. But, you know, the idea of Javon Kinlaw has always kind of been better than Javon Kinlaw. So you pay that guy $15 million? Well, okay, that sounds bad, but it's also $15 million now is like $11 million a couple of years ago. So $15 million for a rotational defensive tackle piece who's going to play 650 snaps for you. That's not a bad price in the modern market. So all in all, like, it's hard to make sense of all these things while the pieces are moving. We're doing the best we can. But the one thing I think you can definitively say for right now is the team better now than they were last week? Yeah. Getting Bobby back, getting Zach back, getting John Bates back as that blocking tight end, getting some of the pieces that they have now in, getting Debo. Like, they are better than they were last year, and there might be consequences in the long term, but that's where we just don't know what the long term is going to look like quite yet. Let's go to AP next. AP, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, how you doing, Hoffman?
Good, man.
Hey, so I'm pretty impressed with the moves we made. As far as the Kinlaw trade, I feel like this is a Adams Peters. I know, this is my guy. I know him, and with Dan Quinn and company, hopefully they can get a lot more out of him, type of situation. As far as the compensation, maybe it's one of those yesterday or today's price is, or today's overpayment is tomorrow's bargain. Hopefully.
Also true.
As far as Tunsil goes, like, this is definitely an investment in Jaden and protecting the investment. And hopefully we don't have to get a miraculous hero ball type of Jaden Daniels. Hopefully we can get a surgeon who's just sitting there comfortably having tea and carving up the defense. But that's my take. Sad to see Jeremy Chin go, but, he did have his flaws as well. I mean, he did lay the lumber, but he did kind of lack a little bit in covering tight ends, but overall, hopefully we can replace him with an upgrade rather than a downgrade. That's all I got. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you got it, AP. Thanks for the call. I mean, again, there's a lot of moving pieces here in terms of what the Commanders are going to do moving forward at some other positions. Like, what happens if they sign Javon Holland? What happens if they do any number of other things at safety? What if they go draft the kid, Amanawari, out of South Carolina? Like, what does that look like? That dude's, been compared to Jeremy Chin. Lance Zierlein has compared him to Jeremy Chin. So there's definitely a lot of intrigue in terms of where this Commanders team goes from here. This is clearly a team that is all in right now, trying to be as good as they possibly can be this year. And when you go to the NFC Championship game in year one and you have this quarterback on a rookie deal, there are definitely worse ideas than seeing how many different places you can get really good talents on your roster. And that is exactly what they're doing. And even in depth, like, is Javon Kinlaw a really good defensive tackle in the NFL? No. Is he a really good defensive tackle 3 in the NFL? Yes. Now, is it worth the price? What else can you do? The thing is, because the salary cap is what it is, we know that they can afford to do a little bit more than maybe we thought they could do coming in. I don't know how many financial choices they really have to make. And because the cap is probably going to continue to grow at an outrageous pace, then maybe a couple of years from now, and maybe even next year, right? Does the Javon Kinlaw, rotational defensive tackle cost you $18 million a year? Maybe, probably not, but it's certainly going to look like all these deals look less ridiculous as time goes on. Rarely do they truly blow up. And the thing is, let's say it's even really bad and he's terrible. Like, are you going to have to eat some dead money to cut him? Unquestionably. But is it going to be an amount that, like, makes you go from Super Bowl team to bottom dweller? No, absolutely not. 301-230-0980. Let's take a quick break, come back. We'll take more of your calls next. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube, too, at the Team 980. Continue to take your calls. Also get in some analysis of some of the other moves that have gone on around the NFL. But just an enormous news day here in D.C. with the Commanders trading for left tackle Laremy Tunsil from the Houston Texans. Let's keep going with the calls. Let's go to Reggie. Reggie, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show.
What's going on, Craig? Love the show as always.
Appreciate it, man.
I'm not sure, man. I know you know. Once you make a list of left tackles, right, you're not going to go down the list too far before you get to Laremy Tunsil's name.
For sure.
That is a stud. Now you get to move Coleman, who played inside, I think at I forgot TCU, wherever he was at, guard, and I believe he right tackle. So when Cosme comes back, man, this makes your whole offensive line better. You know this. So, I mean, this is so far. And think about it. If Laremy Tunsil was, like, made available via trade, man, I'm quite sure, man, that he would have been highly sought after. Or if he was a free agent, he'd have been the number one free agent on the market. Maybe, probably quarterback, but he definitely would have been somebody who would have.
Oh, not in this quarterback class. Like, Laremy Tunsil would have been the belle of this ball.
Okay, well, there you go. So this is, man, I'm ecstatic. Now, the only thing I'm going to ask, because I don't know whether or not Tyler Owens, I could have sworn that, and I know we lost Chen, but I thought that the staff was kind of high on him. I'm assuming, again, I think now when you look at it, okay, we brought the tight ends back. We probably still can kind of use a burner at wide receiver, so maybe that's somebody you can get mid-round. But I think outside of running back, I need at least one game-changing running back. I think all of the attention now is going to go to the defense. I think this draft is going to be heavily defense. I don't know about you, I wasn't a fan of Josh Sweat because I didn't know whether or not he was a product of, you got Carter and you got Davis. Is he a product of that? And I see the Cardinals paid him a boatload of money. So I think we're going to go heavy in the draft as far as our defense. But offensively, Craig, you as a fan, you can't help but to be over the moon when you get a top 5, 6 left tackle. I mean, we haven't had a left tackle like this since Trent. And,
For sure.
with all due respect to maybe everybody else that was afterwards. So I love what the Commanders are doing so far. I'm not sure we're going to make any other moves via free agent. I think we got a lot of people, though, that we could sign. I think we were 24 that was free agents or whatever. So it doesn't appear. I don't know as far as like our D-line. We lost a lot of people on the edges, so I'm not sure what we're going to do as far as edges is concerned. If they got some, I'm assuming multiple people that they got probably targeted in the draft. So I would like to see them, probably a more veteran safety. You mentioned Holland from Miami. So, okay, he may be because we lost 10. Fowler's not signed yet. So, again, we still got some holes that we need to fill in. We need another corner. So there's some pieces. But offensively, Craig, you can't be but ecstatic, man, as a fan offensively.
100%.
We did a hell of a job.
100%. And there's still some guys out there. I mean, like, I haven't seen Darius Slayton sign. I haven't seen some of these other guys that are, on the lower end of the receiver market side. So, Reggie, thanks for the call. Tyler Owens is an interesting name. The staff was definitely high on him, but they're high on him for an undrafted free agent, right? That's very different than like, hey, this guy's a stud. He's a stud special teamer, but there's a very, very different ability to play special teams versus defense. Now, maybe I haven't seen Tyler Owens play defense since training camp last year, and the results were mixed. Like, he definitely made some plays, but he also at times was very confused on what he was supposed to do. And when you tell Tyler Owens run and hit, that's very different in rookie year one than telling Tyler Owens, hey man, here's your responsibility. You're reading this receiver. You're reading this route concept. You have to make sure you're watching the quarterback's eyes. And by the way, you have to communicate all this with there's a lot of stuff that is happening in the NFL in the back end at that safety spot. And so if all of a sudden during the season where he's not getting a ton of reps at safety, but if he's getting those reps and they're like, man, this guy is growing. He's a sponge. We think he can do it. Maybe they do run Tyler Owens out there opposite of Quan Martin next year. I just don't think that is probably their number one option. But it's also worth mentioning Spotrac currently has them still, and they've got the Laremy Tunsil contract on here at a $21.3 million cap hit. They have, do they have Kinlaw yet? I don't see the Kinlaw deal on here. in part because they don't know the structure yet. So they've got them right now at $62.3 million. They probably have around $50 million left, depending on what the Kinlaw number is in year one. That's still plenty of money that they can throw around. So whether it's a wide receiver 2, whether it is, and if Diami got 10, the older Darius Slayton, can you get him, 2 for 16, maybe 2 years, 16 million, 8 million a year? Like, that would be cool. I would love if they could do that kind of thing. Do you, in the edge market, there's a couple interesting guys, like Malcolm Kuntz still hasn't signed. Like, there are guys out there that are available, not to mention what they potentially do in the draft. So there's still a long way to go. They need to both sign some top guys. They need to figure out their second corner spot, obviously, and some of those options are off the board: Carlton Davis, DJ Reed, etc. But there's still the Charvarius Ward option. There's still some other guys and the money that Washington has to throw around. And that's before you even potentially restructure Terry / extend Terry. And then we'll see what they do with Tunsil's deal as well, whether they give him a new one now or do they deal with that maybe even in training camp after they get him in the building and make sure, or whatever the deal that is. Let's go to Terrell in Baltimore. Terrell, I always appreciate your calls, man. What you got for me today on this Tunsil trade?
Hey, man, Craig, listen, I think when I first saw it, I wasn't sure what was happening. You said it was 4 picks, and I think when I read online it was 3. But if it was 4 picks, I think at the end of the day, people are kind of leary because.
Well, just to clean that up, it's a net 3 picks. They gave up 4 but got 1 back.
Right. Okay, so there you have it. So it's like I think a lot of fans just want to hear their team build the team through the draft and not give up a lot of draft capital, right? But, when you're thinking of that perennial left tackle that is going to make sure that Jaden is not running for his life, and that's literally his blind side that he doesn't have to worry about. I think Tunsil gave up, 9 sacks in, the past, I don't know how many years.
His pass blocking numbers are insane.
So it's yeah. So it's like you almost got to break the bank in a way, even if it's draft capital or money, for that type of guy and that long-term thing there. And then, like the previous caller said, what that does to the versatility of the O-line, moving Coleman to a different position, it just shores up that space. And, at the end of the day, I'm like Adams Peters and this organization I trust. It may not make sense right now, but, hey, maybe he takes that $50 million that's left and goes to the second wave of free agency, because today and the next couple of days we're going to hear the big names, we're going to hear the overpayments, right? But maybe he said, I know I'm going to make some deals that make more sense to that second layer, maybe some more Dante Fowler guys. He's not even signed yet, right? So maybe he's got to get humbled in all of this too. The Kinlaw one. We will see what that does, right? I don't know if I really have a judgment on it, but I think it was more so, did we really hurt the money, being as though we were going to be paying John Allen 15, 16 million this year?
No, John was going to. Here's the thing about John Allen. John Allen was going to cost the Commanders over 20 because he already is costing them some in dead money, which I might be able to. Yeah, he's got $6 million in dead money plus the 16 they saved, so he was going to be $22 million. And so you're basically taking the money you saved on Allen minus $1 million and giving it to Kinlaw. So you're still paying Allen the 20, the 6. But Kinlaw plus Allen's dead money is 21. But I think the flexibility, and the thing is, Kinlaw is currently 27. He'll turn 28 during the season, and he hasn't played a ton of snaps. Now, part of that's because he was hurt. But even then, he was more of a rotational piece in San Francisco at times. So the wear and tear on him, I think he's going to be able to come in and give you 700, 750 snaps, which is what he gave the Jets last year. And he was still playing really well, arguably his best ball at the end of the year. So you're getting younger. And I think the other thing, too, is attitudinally, very clearly, I think they were done with John. And Javon Kinlaw is a guy that, after he was done in San Francisco, Robert Saleh brought him to New York, and now Adam Peters, that he's done in New York with Saleh, is hey, I want you in D.C. with me. So I definitely think he seems like a good locker room guy, and watching his tape, does he get moved? Yeah. Does he play hard as hell? Also, yeah. So there's going to be some pluses and minuses there for him as a rotational piece.
And do you open up more reps for Newton with a Kinlaw as opposed to him trying to figure out reps with John Allen and the attitude piece? You know what I mean? So
100%.
it may make more sense for the whole, for the whole of the team as opposed to like keeping an Allen.
That is 100% correct. Yeah.
So in that regard, I like it.
All right, Terrell, appreciate your call as always, man. Really smart. And I think that last part is really important. When they want to establish, like another team that actually I think is doing a great job of this today, I don't know if the New England Patriots are going to be any good next year. I do know playing them is going to kind of suck because they have gotten a bunch of dudes who just play really hard, really physical football. And in year one of Mike Vrabel, he has said basically, with the way that they've treated this, exactly what Dan Quinn said last year, which is, if nothing else happens, we are going to establish our play style. We're going to play hard. We're going to play physical. And Javon Kinlaw, he plays hard. He plays physical. He's 6'5", and sometimes that's a really bad thing for a guy who's trying to get leverage. Low man wins, and you're 6'5". You ain't the low man all the time. He gets moved more than I'd like. The idea of Javon Kinlaw has always been a bit better than the football player, Javon Kinlaw. But his influence in that room will be positive. And that's worth something. And if he's your third guy, like you can do a lot worse than Javon Kinlaw, and the price isn't, is it a little expensive? Yes. Is it crazy? No. Definitely not. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We got a couple of phone lines open, a couple of them stacked up. We'll get to those of you that are on hold next. And then if you want to get on hold, there's some spots available. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We are always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Anthony, I love sometimes putting you up on the screen when, say, something like Swag Surfing's playing, and then on YouTube they can't hear the music, so you're just...
I'm just dancing.
You're just vibing to nothing. Vibing to the sound of me reintroducing the show. A couple of housekeeping items here. Some news that is broken in the last hour, including one on a name that I did not see come through, and I think I mentioned him in the last segment. Malcolm Kuntz is actually not available anymore. Literally somewhere between 25 and 40 minutes ago. He signed a one-year deal with the Raiders, so he gets like a one-year, $12 million prove-it deal. A guy that was on the up and up 2 years ago, had an ACL injury, played okay last year, but I think he feels like if I can go back, play really well, maybe next year I sign the big deal. He's 27, so he'll be 28 next year. And then we just got this one in. ESPN's Adam Schefter reporting that the Eagles are trading quarterback Kenny Pickett to the Browns for a 5th-round pick and Dorian Thompson-Robinson. So Dorian Thompson-Robinson, your new backup for Jalen Hurts. Kenny Pickett, thanks for handing the Commanders to the game in whenever that was. Whenever that game was, December.
Yep.
And have fun in Cleveland. Have fun in Cleveland.
I hate that for him.
I don't. Kenny Pickett was kind of a jerk at the end of his time with the Steelers. So, your punishment after you got a Super Bowl ring is you have to go play for the Browns. Karma. Or something. I don't know. Kenny Pickett might be a nice guy. Now I feel like a jerk. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Let's keep the calls going at 301-230-0980. Let's go to Dominic. Dominic, thanks for holding. Appreciate it, dude. What you got on what the Commanders have done today?
Yeah, Greg, thanks for the call. At first I had to, really let it sink in for a minute. And, and then it finally hit me. I'm like, hey, this is our best left tackle since Trent Williams. So, and they came out with a report before free agency started that they wanted to beef up the O-line. And they did what they said they were going to do. So my question is to the offensive line part is, do you think they're done on the offensive line? I'm assuming now this obviously means that Coleman's going to kick into guard with Cosme, out for probably until, I'm going to say October. And Wiley is just Wiley. Do you see a situation where they go right tackle or do they sign another guard, like maybe a Sheriff as a return, and to that, aside from that, at wide receiver, because I still think they're not done at wide receiver. I still think they definitely need a number 2. Do they go out and get somebody, or do they, re-sign Zacchaeus, which is probably what I think they're going to do?
All right, hold on. I'm going to work backwards. I'm going to keep you on the phone here so I do not forget all of the questions you asked, because they were all good ones. My brain is fried. I did 2 hours live at noon today on the internet, and now I'm going on hour number 3 here on the radio, so brain space is getting cramped. Wide receiver. I don't think that Zacchaeus, could OZ come back, and would that be a good signing? Yes. Is he coming back as your number 2? No. Because he and Debo are very similar stylistically. Zacchaeus is more of like a traditional slot in terms of some of the quick area stuff. But they're both essentially zone players who are dangerous with the ball in their hands. Zacchaeus, like that punt returner type, obviously did return punts for them last year. But I could see him or Crowder coming back potentially to kind of beef up in that receiving room. I think Noah Brown coming back as their 2 is probably the most likely re-sign where he would be an actual 2 because he's got that bigger body type, the vertical route tree, and some speed. I still think they probably go elsewhere. I still think that, again, I'll bring it up for the 800th time. I think Darius Slayton is a perfect fit here. I think the vertical speed and the production he's had, there's kind of a joke amongst NFL, insider types that have been breaking this stuff down that, every single year the Giants tried to replace Darius Slayton as their number 1 wide receiver until they finally, really replaced him with Malik Neighbors. And every single year, all they did was lead them in receiving. And so the guy's clearly a good football player. And so if they can get him, I like that at receiver. All right, what was the next position that you wanted me to pontificate on?
Yeah, so just going back to the offensive line part.
Yes.
Do you see a situation, where they cut Wiley and they bring in another because they were interested in Morgan Moses. So clearly they're looking at the right side of the line. Or do they bring a Brandon Sheriff back to play right guard? Do they go draft with that Connolly out of
Connerly
Oregon?
out of Oregon. Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can go into this thinking like we are definitely going offensive tackle at 29 because that gets you into trouble. Like what happens if Connerly goes at 28? You're screwed. Or do you take the next best guy who you actually shouldn't take until 54? Like that, you can't go into the draft that way. You have to treat free agency like the draft doesn't exist when you're picking this late in the first round. So my guess is they keep Wiley. Wiley was fine last year. Like he's not great. You will always be able to do better than Andrew Wiley. I don't know how much better you're going to do for Andrew Wiley than at $10 million, which is the amount that you'd save, unless you think that you can get someone inside who's less expensive and kick Coleman out to right tackle. But here's the thing. Coleman's never played right tackle. He played left tackle and left guard and some right guard at TCU. He never played right tackle. I double-checked that in the last break. So the idea that he could play right tackle, not far-fetched. But I think you probably just kick him inside and Wiley stays at right tackle, and then you figure out right tackle next year, or you draft a guy this year that's your swing tackle for now and your right tackle for later. So that's that. I think on the edge and at corner, I think you probably need to sign someone, and maybe they go back to Fowler in the bargain bin once he's done tweeting, or they do whatever else they need to do kind of in that bargain bin, take a chance on a guy with some pass rush upside. And then you probably also draft one. That's the position that I would be hoping someone falls to me at 29. And then at corner, I do think that there are some guys in this draft that 29 you're going to feel pretty good, or at 35 or 40 if you trade back, that you're going to feel pretty good about there being one of the guys that you like available. That's kind of the sweet spot range where there's a bunch, like the after the first couple of guys go off the board, like Hunter and there's a couple other guys that are like bona fide top half of the first round guys. The next group should be starting to come off the board there. And so could you wait? Yes, but they probably do something to solidify that spot as a floor ahead of time. That's kind of my 2 cents on it.
Sure.
And we'll see what
and
it is.
And then my last question is, Craig, if I have the time here, is do you see a situation where DeMarcus Lawrence jumps from the Cowboys over to us if we can't get Fowler re-signed?
Yeah, absolutely. I think DQ would take him. I think he still has a little bit left. He's not nearly the player that he used to be, but like DQ likes his guys and the guys that he's had success with. And I think Tank is a rotation player at this point, but like you can do a lot worse than Tank Lawrence as a rotation player. So Dominic, good questions. Good call. Appreciate it. Charvarius Ward, not going to be the guy for DC at corner, if that's what you were hoping. And honestly, I love this for Charvarius Ward. He gets a 3-year deal worth up to $60 million, $35 million guaranteed. I believe that is the richest corner contract of the day, surpassing what Carlton Davis got from the New England Patriots. And if you're unfamiliar with Charvarius Ward's story, he is a guy that was playing extremely well for San Francisco on those Super Bowl caliber teams, and then had just an unimaginable tragedy, lost his child, just toddler, in the middle of, or like before last season in training camp, early in last season, somewhere in that time frame. And he just, he's going in his free agent year and then just did not play well because obviously his mind was not where it needed to be. And he just needed a fresh start. He wanted out of San Francisco, not because of anything specific to San Francisco, just that there's a lot of trauma, a lot of bad memories, and just he needed a fresh start kind of in life. And for the Colts to be like, talk to him, I guess, and be like, hey, man, we believe in you. Get that kind of big time money. Like, good for Charvarius Ward on a human level. Would have loved to see it happen here in D.C. because I think he's a good player. But wishing the absolute best for Charvarius Ward and his $35 million guaranteed and $60 million contract. All right, more of your calls next. We'll see if we can get about 3 or 4 more in before Logan joins us coming up at 6. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We are always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live on YouTube too at the Team 980. Coming up 6 o'clock, we will get Logan Paulson in here, and we're basically going to do a live edition of Take Command. We've never done this before. We've had Logan call into the show, but we are basically just going to do the podcast live on the air, talking about everything that we have seen today from the Washington Commanders. So it's going to be a fun time to have LP calling in and getting all that taken care of. But now we got time for a couple more calls at 301-230-0980. Let's start off with Kenny in Charlotte. Kenny, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show.
What's up, dude? How you doing?
Doing well, doing well.
Hey, look, man. So I love the offensive move. The defensive linemen, okay. It seems like they're kind of aiming for the draft, but what I wanted to know from you is, with them seemingly, from the naked eye, not really valuing the draft this particular year, does it speak to the fact that there's still several or a handful of players from last year that they're going to get on the field, and that's what they're counting on based on wanting to develop players also? That was just the main question that I had for you.
I mean, I think in a way you have to, Kenny. Like they have to rely on some of the guys that they did not get production from last year having production. It is just a reality of, like, if you want to be good, that's how the league works. Like, if you are the Kansas City Chiefs, right? They had guys like L'Jarius Sneed who were late. I think, wasn't Sneed, Anthony, a 7th? I'm pretty sure he was. I'm pretty sure he was a later round pick that turned.
Sneed was that late?
I don't know if he was a 7th. Maybe he was something else. But they've had multiple 7th round picks that always seem to turn into starting corners for them. That's how they were good. And then, by the way, they also were a team that tried to address left tackle 2 years in a row in the draft in the 2nd and 3rd rounds, and they missed both times. And then they had a left tackle problem, and it probably cost them a Super Bowl. So, you have to get production. I mean, think of the great Niners teams that Adam helped to build. They never won a Super Bowl, but they get guys like Fred Warner. They get guys like Hufanga down the list of rounds in the draft that contribute for them. And it doesn't have to necessarily contribute right away, but there's no doubt that, yes, if you get Jaden Daniels and Mikey Sanders still to be the core of your team for the future, that's a successful draft in 2024. But if they want to continue to be good over the next 3 to 4 years, yes, Laramie Tunsil is going to help. Yes, some of these other guys that they're bringing in and will bring in, / are bringing back, will help. but they're going to have some of these guys develop, and hopefully it's sooner rather than later. And you even saw it last year, right? They were able to overcome the fact that they took a risk on Emmanuel Forbes. They decided they were going to put their resources somewhere else, not address corner, hope Forbes worked. He didn't, and they had to try to make it work, and they never really got there, which is why they did the Marshawn Lattimore thing. So definitely a great question, and the answer is yes. They will absolutely need some of those guys to come through.
Real quick, do you think they are also maybe, being a general manager, you're not just looking at this 1 year, but you're also projecting for the next draft as well. So it's just going to be interesting to see how Adam Peters moves. But from last year to this year, it seems like he's going to be the same guy. His free agency is not going to wow anybody, but hope to get production from who he brings in. Like he did last year. So appreciate it, Craig.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate your call, Kenny, as always. Let's go to DH. Our guy DH is on the mic. What's up, dude? How are you?
Craig, what's up, man? How you doing, man? It's been a long time, man.
Indeed.
Hey, man, listen, Snead was a fourth-round pick, by the way. I looked it up.
Thank you. Someone's got to.
Yeah, hey, no problem, bro. But, man, listen, I love what Adam Peters is doing, man. Like, he identified what we need, right? We need help on the edges, right? So we need help. Well, he's going to attack the defensive end position, but we need help at tackle on offensive line, and then we need another dynamic playmaker with Debo, man. And, like, I don't think he's making any sexy free agent splashes or anything like that. He's just doing what he needs to do. And he's proven that he knows way more than us. So I just tell people, like, sit back, let him do his thing because he knows what he's doing. And I think they identified that Super Bowl window is open right now, and you got to attack. So some of these trades where people seeing the draft capital go away, but you getting a perennial Pro Bowler who's going to be your bookend for the next 10 years and can play good football, doesn't give up that many sacks. So you're going to need a guy like Tunsil on your squad. Debo, who's going to be hungry this year to get a new contract and to show teams around the league that he can be the go-to guy. You get Kinlaw on the inside who will help with Johnny Newton. You look at some of these signings right now. I don't think they're done, but I think they might really get active on day 2 and day 3 in those upcoming days to fill the back end of the roster. And then just attack the draft like they did last year, man. Finding guys that can play at every position and just using what they have to build what they got. And right now, that Super Bowl window is wide open, so they got to be aggressive and getting good players in here, man.
For sure. And I think DH, on top of that, like all of the Super Bowl window being wide open stuff, look at the NFC. Like the Eagles are awesome, obviously. The Lions are trying to figure out, they got new coordinators. We'll see. Like, it's a fun time. It's a fun time to mess around and see what we got in the NFC and how many more teams are really ahead of Washington. Minnesota, they've got their rookie or now second-year guy, and J.J. McCarthy is going to be taking the reins. I don't think Seattle scares anybody with Sam Darnold. Like, the NFC West is going to be interesting for sure, but it definitely is wide open. All right. Last but not least, let's go to Miles real quick. Miles, thanks for calling. You're on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, what's going on, Craig? Thank you for taking my call.
You got it.
I just wanted to say I've loved the free agency so far, especially the Laramie Tunsil signing, how we didn't just give him a boatload of 2025 picks and spread it out through 2 years. I really did appreciate that. And I've loved the free agency so far. I think the only thing that has me scratching my head a bit is the John Bates signing. Like I understand he's a good blocking tight end. It's just when you think of all the good teams, like they're not paying a backup tight end for 3 years after they just drafted a tight end in Senate. Like I feel like
they're totally different players.
It's telling of. But so I feel like that's telling of Senate though. Like, is he really just not ready to play at all? Like, he's supposed to be a blocker, but
he's not.
We're
he's a very
blocker.
different kind of blocker than Bates is. Bates is a bona fide Y tight end. I don't want to call him a sixth offensive lineman, but much closer to that. Where Senate is a guy that if you get him on the move, like fullback style, he can be a blocker. But he's much more of like a vertical downfield passing threat, really. And yes, there's clearly were issues with Ben Sinnott last year. You don't have a second-round pick whose role diminishes throughout the year if he's doing well. That guy's role gets bigger. But I think Sinnott is like Sinnott, Ertz, and Bates are all very different. Zach is good in the short areas. He's trying to get open on third downs, like underneath type stuff. I think Sinnott is like a seam running field stretcher, and then hopefully a guy who can, you give him a running start as a fullback, or you put him in motion and have him lead as a blocker for Jaden out in front on an arc option, and like he'll blow somebody's face mask off. But if you think that he is like a backup tight end who is going to sit there and block a defensive end, you got the wrong guy. That's kind of where we're at with that. All right, we got to run because speaking of tight ends, Logan Paulson joins us next here on the Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We are always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube too at the Team 980. Logan Paulson is with us here on the show. And Logan is basically, we're going to do a live edition of Take Command here to react to all of the news of the day. First of all, how you doing, buddy?
I'm excellent, man. Good to be talking to you, and it's going to be fun to talk about some of these moves.
Yeah, so I thought about just playing the full Take Command intro. I feel like that might be a little bit extra.
Probably a little bit.
But that's fine. We're just gonna get rolling here. So with that, let us dive into the news of the day, which changed dramatically before we started live on the radio. We had thought the news of the day was going to be the Javon Kinlaw signing, and who knows, maybe they do something else in free agency. And then, oh my God, they traded for Laramie Tunsil. The trade return, if you have not heard, is a fourth-round pick with Tunsil to Washington in exchange for 4 picks, the best of which is a 2026 second-round pick. Washington also gives up their third in the 2025 draft. Logan, let's just start with who Tunsil is as a football player at this point in his career. We know the Houston offensive line was bad last year. There was a lot of structural reasons why that happened. But is Laramie Tunsil still the top 5 tackle that he was universally thought of a couple years ago?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think there's a lot of things that, like because of the protection stuff, because of like kind of the systematic stuff that's going on with the team and with the Houston Texans specifically, it's kind of tough to separate that evaluation. But when you watch him on a down-to-down basis, man, he's still special. He's still got a great feel for his pass protection. The line is excellent. The punch is excellent. The timing is excellent. The footwork's excellent. He's still athletic enough to get out in space. And quite frankly, I played with some pretty good left tackles in my career, and he is up there in terms of like talent, with very close to Trent Williams. Obviously, Trent Williams is a unicorn, but this guy's special, and I think it's special the opportunity that he affords the Washington Commanders now. Man, I'm really fired up about this opportunity. He's young. He's got a lot of football ahead of him. I think, because of the current cap situation, you feel really good about what he's going to bring and what they can build around him. But yeah, man, I think he is. He's still got the juice, and I can't wait to watch how Cliff deploys him here in Washington.
Yeah, for sure. I think that he is, like, if you're talking about a top 5 tackle, we talked about how this team needs blue chippers. And ultimately, like, this is a blue chip guy. And you just don't have guys available very often that are this caliber of football player. And so with that being the case, I don't want to say you have to make this move because, like, obviously you don't have to go trade 1 million draft picks or whatever. But, like, if you're looking to acquire this level of talent and you were too good last year to acquire it probably in the draft, your options are just extremely limited. And in that way, like, I like the other thing I've keep coming back to, as I've talked about this today, Logan, on the show, is ultimately you're just trying to get better as a football team. And when you went to the NFC Championship game, if you are better, hopefully that means you're going to the Super Bowl or winning the Super Bowl. And there's no doubt, we can talk about the price, and we will, but there's no doubt if they're better now, then Laramie Tunsil makes them better, and that, like, ultimately better is better, I guess, is the very long-winded point of that.
Yeah, and I think the main thing that I get out of this is, like, where else are you going to find a franchise left tackle, right? And everyone talks about, you can draft one at 29. I'm telling you right now, the options are going to be pretty slim. Like, Connor Lee from Oregon was probably a guy that would fall in that range, and he's still got a lot of work to do, a lot of elemental stuff to do. So you say, Little from Jacksonville resigns, Stanley from Baltimore resigns, Larry Jackson from LA resigns. Teams do not let serviceable, competent offensive linemen leave their building, right? So the only other way to get it is through trade. And so, obviously kudos to Adam Peters for making the phone call, finding an opportunity where the price tag for the existing team is getting a little bit too high. They need to extend some people down the road. Bring in a guy like Laramie Tunsil. And again, this is what it takes, right? This is what he did in San Francisco to bring Trent there. You got to find a team that's willing to dance. And every team knows and understands what the value of this player is. You got to kind of go out and put yourself out there. Because again, like, as much as people want to say go draft a left tackle, starting left tackle in the NFL, I'll tell you right now, every single player in this draft class, maybe with the exception of Armand Membu, is a little bit of a project, right? And so Armand Membu is not going to be there when you pick a 20. I don't know how else you're going to get one. You got to go out and trade for it. And so this is the cost of doing business. And this is the benefit of having a quarterback on a rookie deal. You can do these types of things, build the team around him. And again, this was the thing that I kept coming back to as the big offseason narrative issue is How do you get better on the offensive line? You need to upgrade, in my opinion, the left tackle spot. That's not an indictment of Brandon Coleman. I just think he was playing out of position a little bit, right? Now it gives you some flexibility. You got your cornerstone left tackle there. You got a great center. When Cosby's healthy, you got a right guard. 3 of the 5 pieces are exactly where you need them to be, and then you can kind of mix and match as needed with the other pieces you got. So to me, this is an essential move. This has to happen. I'm so glad it did happen because it raises the floor of the offense. Look no further than the Super Bowl. I know we tend to have like this immediate knee-jerk reaction to seeing people like in the Super Bowl specifically, oh my gosh, the offensive line's terrible, whatever. But that's with a young quarterback, with a guy that's going to change this organization's trajectory. You need to protect him. You need to keep him upright because when he's upright, he's a dangerous football player.
So the next step then is like, what about the rest of the line? I think that most folks think that Brandon Coleman could be a really good guard in this league. I know that's where you projected him initially coming out. Why do you think they ultimately decide to abandon the Brandon Coleman left tackle experiment? And then what's next for Brandon Coleman, whether it be left guard or right tackle? Like, what are the options here?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything's on the table for him. I think when you look at, again, I think he can play left guard. I think he can play right guard in a pinch. I think he can play right tackle. And I think when you look at his athletic measurables, I think that's exactly what you're kind of thinking about maybe long term. Maybe not week 1, but I think everything is on the table for him. And I think that's, again, good process by Adam Peters. Find a guy in the 3rd round that has some position flexibility, that has the athletic upside, that has the traits, that has the length. All those things you're hunting for an offensive lineman. And again, just talk about raising the floor, right? I don't think this means they don't draft an offensive lineman in the draft, but now that guy can be more developmental, more long-term, more kind of future looking. And I think, again, this is exactly what you needed in terms of offensive additions, right? At a cornerstone left tackle, you immediately get better at one of the other positions, whether it's right tackle or left guard. And then if you play, let's say he does play left guard, Allegretti can play right tackle until Cosme gets back. And again, that's a serviceable group. And when you look at Jaden Daniels and how effective he is when he's not pressured, when he can see home, and you get those 5 guys playing at a super high level, it's awesome. And then you think about what it does for Cliff, man. I'd say look no further than San Francisco last year. I talked to someone who I thought was very bright this offseason and said, what's the issue with the offense? And it wasn't Brandon Ayuk, it wasn't Deebo Samuel, it wasn't Christian McCaffrey. The first thing out of his mouth was like, they lost the left tackle, and it's really negatively impacted their ability to call offensive plays. And so I look at that and I say, that's no longer an issue here as long as Laremy Tunsil stays healthy, and injury has not been an issue for him throughout his career. So to me, this is the move. It gives Cliff more flexibility, makes Jaden Daniels immediately better, improves you in the run and the pass game. So whatever the cost was, and we'll talk about that in a second, man, like this is the move, and it needed to happen. And right now I feel so much better going into the 2025 season because of this.
So let's talk about the cost. And there's a meme from Fresh Prince where like Will Smith is just standing in the middle of the room eventually, and he's looking around and he's like, nobody here. And there is, I think, a little bit of fear that like 3 years from now, when some of these older guys retire and some of the older guys move on, or these contracts all of a sudden are not guys that you can spend on because you're paying Jaden Daniels more money than any other player in football, that like, then what? And obviously these are later problems. If you've won a Super Bowl, or even if you've been to 1 or 2, like I think it justifies the experiment. The whole point is to win Lombardis. The whole point is to give yourself a chance. But there is, I think, reasonable limitations to say, like, eventually we do want to acknowledge that this is a long runway, hopefully, with Jaden Daniels. We would like to compete for a long, long time. What is the threshold, and how close are we to the threshold of giving away too many draft picks? As they net lost 3 here. They obviously traded for Lattimore, and there's, traded for Deebo. Like, draft picks are meant to get good players. That's good. They've gotten theoretically good players with them. But eventually, like, you do want some of these guys on rookie deals because you want them here for a long time, not just a short time.
Yeah, and I think there's some of that forward-thinking process happening. When you look at the trade deal for Laremy Tunsil specifically, right? You only give up, what is it, 1 pick in 2 picks in 2025, but you get 1 back, right, from the Houston Texans. So, again, I think that's, again, understanding that I gotta keep that first-round pick this year because I need to get a difference maker on probably now on the defensive line, I would assume. Obviously, we'll see what happens at 29. You can trade out of that spot and then maybe accrue more draft capital, but I do think you see an awareness by Adam Peters. We need to get these these pivotal pieces, right? These left tackle. We need to, improve on the defense. We need to make some of these moves, but we also need to make sure there's that scaffolding of youth that we can count on when Jaden Daniels is a high price free agent. Obviously, we're not going to let him get the free agency. They're going to give him an extension. But I think that, to me, that was another really good part of this deal. It's like, hey, man, let's make sure we reserve these 5 draft picks so that we can infuse good talent. We have the first. We kept our first next year. I think those are all good things. And then we can trade. We can make other moves for 2026 to make sure that we have enough draft capital to continue that process. So I do think there is an awareness. And again, the thing that I keep coming back to is I don't know how else you would have done it, right? So there's no other way around this for the offensive lineman specifically, right? There's no other way to get here without making this trade. And I just think the way they structured it was really, really smart because it still lets you get 5 really good pieces this year, especially looking at last year's draft. I think they did a great job in the first half of the draft. Obviously, quarterback Mike Sanderson, Donnie Newton, and then the back half, Dominique Hampton, Jordan McGee, John Baptiste, really good players that are going to contribute. So they've shown they can draft at the front and the back end at a high level, and Brandon Coleman as well. So we get another 5 opportunities at it, and to get 5 more people we can build this roster around, I think that shows really great awareness.
So I think it's important to clarify, we're hoping that Dominique Hampton's a good football player. We're hoping that Jordan McGee is. McGee showed some stuff on special teams last year. He plays like an animal. John Baptiste, for a 7th rounder, to be a part of the rotation in year 1 on defense at a tough position at edge, that's not nothing. He wasn't awesome, but he was fine. He was an end of rotation guy on the cheapest contract you can basically get in the entire league, which is fine. But those guys aren't done developing. You'd hope John Baptiste is a bigger role this year. We'll see what McGee can do. We'll see. Hampton's a guy I've thought about a lot in the last 24 hours. And you hear some of the stuff that you're hearing about. Do they want to play a little bit more man coverage? Is that why they didn't re-sign Chin? And a guy who they converted from safety to linebacker, you'd hope is pretty good in coverage for a linebacker, even if he wasn't necessarily, that was his strength as a safety. So hopefully that he can play a bigger role and these draft picks look good in the long term. And then obviously they have to do it again. But I think it's worth making that differentiation because some people are obviously people are up in arms about Sinnott because he's a 2nd round pick who didn't have a very good rookie year. But I think the other ones too, there are definitely people that are are those guys even any good? And it's they're not all going to be good instantly. They're not all Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels broke our brain on what a rookie's supposed to be.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up. And so the reason I brought up the draft picks and the value of draft picks is it gives you young, cost-controlled assets that have a runway to develop, like you're alluding to there. So when I see Dominic Hampton in the preseason, I see an NFL player. When I see a healthy Jordan McGee, I see an NFL player. Now, what is their ultimate role? That's still yet to be decided. But you have talented people with speed, athleticism, and length that fit and understand and are homegrown products that are leaders and can kind of identify what it means to be a commander. So I'm excited about that. I think there needs to be more of those guys. I look at kind of the last regime and how difficult it is now to have the kind of middle class scaffolding of this roster because you don't have your linebacker and Jordan Davis. You don't have that defensive lineman and big. All those guys are gone because there was no development. I just think I'm excited about those guys I just mentioned because they can develop. There's an opportunity for them to improve, and I think that's where the ultimate value is for me and from my observation standpoint. Is just good to have people like that in the building, and hopefully they can do it again in this upcoming draft.
So, yes, and then I think when you look at this draft, what Adam has done is just he's walking a higher tightrope. And it's not that they don't have any draft picks. They are certainly at the lower end of, I think, what you'd want. But if he hits on the lottery tickets, if they go 5 for 5, shoot, if they go 4 for 5 in this draft and they wind up with just the 5, which also presumes that they don't make another trade on draft night or earlier to trade back and acquire more picks, which is still very much on the table, then it doesn't matter. Which was kind of the running joke, I think, at the end of the season. It's what can we learn from the Eagles? And it's hit every single one of your draft picks. If you can hit every single one of your draft picks, you will have no problems ever for the rest of time. And so, of course, that's an unreasonable expectation. But I do think it's worth pointing out that, if you are Adam, you've made your job difficult, but you've also made your job easier because you are not now all of a sudden taking these massive, wild upside swings on guys. Maybe you can just really be true to who you are and building your play style through the draft with guys that you hope will be around for a long time. And this is the curse of being good. You have to figure out how to acquire top-end talent without top-end draft assets. And especially in an NFL environment, Logan, as we talked about a little bit last week, and we've certainly talked about on the radio show as well, where free agency is thinner than it has ever been because you've had multiple years in a row where the cap has jumped more than anticipated. You get 20% cap jumps every year. Teams are going to be able to retain their players, which means if you want to go get someone else's player, you're going to have to do what they're doing. And because of the lack of talent that was left by the Rivera era, there are a couple guys, Cosme, Quan Martin, etc. There just aren't the blue chip guys. This team is kind of in a tough spot to surround Jaden. But if you have the Jaden piece, then everything else is much easier than finding the quarterback. So these are in some ways champagne problems.
Yeah, I think so. And I also, like you mentioned this draft, and I do think like if you want to be picking somewhere, it's probably like where the Commanders are picking. I don't think the top end is that quality. And I think like 29 is great. I think the second pick in that pick in the second round will be a great value piece. And obviously you got to hit on it and make it happen. But like you said, like this is the problem that good quarterbacks help you overcome, right? Like look at what Patrick Mahomes does, look what Joe Burrow does, look what Josh Allen does, right? Every year, every team goes in, they're like every pundit goes in. It's like, oh, the Bills aren't as good as they're supposed to be. The roster's not there. Shoot, Josh Allen figures it out, right? Same thing with Joe Burrow. Same thing with Patrick Mahomes. Like this was one of the offensively one of the most kind of pieced together rosters for Kansas City. They figured it out because you got the guy at the most important position probably in all of sports. And so ultimately, like as much as we want to talk about, again, they're short on draft picks. They handled one of the biggest issues, which is getting a left tackle. And it's not just a left tackle; it's a good left tackle, a top 5 left tackle in the NFL. Those guys are not cheap; they're hard to come by. You're probably not going to get one in the draft. Like think about how many left tackles have been drafted over the last couple of years that have hit and made it work, and there's not a lot of them. So this is why this is so exciting to me because it shows multiple levels of understanding by Adam Peters. Right? It shows that he understands. We have to get this. It's hard to get this guy. We're going to find a way to get it done. We're limited on draft assets. We're going to utilize them the way we want. We're going to get a playmaking wide receiver, right, in Deebo Samuel. We trust our training staff to keep him healthy, to keep him in shape. He's going to be motivated, ready to go. He's a Commanders type player. I've worked with him before. And now we're going to allocate these other draft resources to make sure that we can get younger and more talented while we've made these other big moves. And again, it puts more stress on the scouting department, but that's why you got to make big time decisions, like you're saying, when you're picking at the end of the first round and you're winning a lot of football games.
Yeah, for sure. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are doing a Take Command live episode, essentially, here as Logan Paulson is with us. The other big news of the day is Javon Kinlaw. 3 years, $45 million is the top line number. It's really a 2 for 30 deal. We'll see what the final structure is, but $30 million guaranteed. So likely kind of 2 for 30. I've started to watch a little bit of the tape, Logan. Very interesting player. And the idea of Javon Kinlaw is amazing. He hustles his face off. He can be physical. He can be violent. He's 6'5". He's 320 pounds. The reality of Javon Kinlaw is sometimes that 6'5" seems to work against him a little bit. And, a guy that is built like the prototypical run stuffer is actually probably a better pass rusher than he is a run defender. I know you've been watching some tape as well. What do you think of the Javon Kinlaw acquisition, both player and price?
Yeah, so I think obviously I think the defensive tackle, like interior pass rusher market is going to be a little bit elevated. I didn't see what Bill Williams got, but obviously
26.
Odighi Zua from Dallas like got a lot of money too. So like it's going to be elevated. So these guys that have any kind of upside on the interior are going to get paid because it's again like offensive linemen, it's harder to find these positions. So while I agree with you, I do think that there are some things to be desired from his play style, right? But when you look at him and he is big, he's physical, and if you can get him going in the right direction and kind of get it all targeted, I think it's going to work out really well for you. Now, the thing that I think is so interesting about this signing is on paper, I'm kind of like, it doesn't blow my socks off. But the one thing I do trust is that Dan Quinn, Adam Peters, this defensive staff, they've done a good job kind of rehoming guys that are very, very talented, have these measurables, and they kind of fit them into the scheme. So part of me is like, are they going to have him play just straight 3 technique, or is he going to do some kind of stuff on the perimeter the way they did with Holmes this year? And again, that might be more of a natural fit for him, where he's finding better matchups. He can rush with power. He does have a tremendous get off. There's a lot of issues with this game, but anything physical, length, strength, run straight, like he is going to absolutely murder that. So if you can find a way to maximize his skill set, and we've talked about this ad nauseum, Dan and this staff has done such a great job of saying, hey, you don't do this thing well, but we trust that we can identify what you do well and get you in that role. So that's kind of what I'm hoping for here. Again, he's a former first round pick. The physical tools are there, right? The physical tools are there, but it's never quite clicked. I will say the last 3 games of last year were probably the best 3 games that I've seen him played over the course of his career. So maybe it's kind of clicking at the right time. You're kind of buying low on an appreciating asset, maybe. But I also trust the staff to kind of get him coached up, get him right. I mean, look at what Ryan Kerrigan was able to do with that group of edge rushers last year, in addition to the defensive line coach, whose name escapes me at the moment. But those are things that I think I'm kind of betting on that as of right now, and hopefully that turns out for the best.
Yeah, Daryl Tapp does
Thank you.
a great job as the defensive line coach, along with Kerrigan on the edge. A couple things I think are worth pointing out / circling back to, underlining, whatever, underscoring that you just said. Kinlaw was hurt, I think it was 2 years ago, on the ACL. Maybe it was 3 years ago. So if he all of a sudden is rounding into form health-wise, that could be a boon. And these are like admittedly reasons for optimism. We can also go to the other side here in a second. But reasons for optimism. Finished last year extremely well. Great. Fantastic. Especially as he gets farther and farther away from an ACL injury. Goes into this offseason healthy. What can he do when he gets here with this training staff, with this strength staff, who got so much out of so many different guys last year? That's thing one. Thing two, just like you said, they know what role they want or they would not bring him in. And, I'm not saying that he's going to be their version of Zach Bond, where it's like, hey, we flip your role and now you're an all-pro Defensive Player of the Year candidate. But I do think it's worth pointing out, they have starters at defensive tackle. Like Jazon Newton was a second-round pick last year, and Deron Payne is still here. So this guy is probably your DT3, and is $15 million a lot for a DT3? Kind of. But also with the way the market is and the way the cap has risen, like we're talking about like 4 or 5% of the salary cap probably, depending on the structure of the deal, which is equivalent to what, 11, 10 million a couple years ago, which for a guy, and again, he's not your starter, but he's going to play 650, 70 or 700 snaps for you. Like that's a requisite value. That's fine. So that's part of it. 3. We know that Dan Quinn has liked to have, they used to have a name for it, and I was reading an article in the Sacramento Bee from like 2014 before the show that chronicled this. I think I can't remember it, but there was like a term for the big defensive end that the term has changed over the course of years, but Pete Carroll used it, and DQ got it from Pete, and they had a guy in Seattle that was like this, and we saw it last year with Payne.
Red Bryant.
Yeah, Red Bryant in Seattle. Who was, by the way, 6'5", 326 per Pro Football Reference. Kinlaw 6'5", 320. So literally the exact same kind of build. And we saw last year with John and Duran then put that defensive tackle player out on the edge. And that pass rush value, that size, that length, maybe he's not a great run stopper inside. Could he do a little bit more outside? So I think there's a lot of potential upside here. And the last thing I'll say is this, Logan. There's a clear bet on the character here. And Kinlaw was a guy who was drafted in the first round by San Francisco, by an organization that cares about that stuff. Then Robert Saleh, who was with him in San Francisco, saw some of the shortcomings and was like, I don't care. I want you in New York with me in a year where my job's on the line. Okay, he doesn't play great, but then Adam Peters is like, I want you here in D.C. after knowing you in San Francisco. That at the very least speaks well to the person. And considering this will be his age 27 into 28 season, a time when defensive tackles typically peak, I understand the bet. I'm not going to say that this is guaranteed to work. I'm not being like, this is the greatest move ever. I'm not even saying like, this is a great move, period. I just understand it. And I think like at the very least, that's worth something.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's a really nice way to articulate that, actually. I think you highlighted like the pros and cons of it. Is getting better, still a young player. If it does hit, you're going to look like a genius, right? Because you're buying low, relatively speaking, to the rest of the market, and you're going to get a guy who's going to play significant minutes for you. Like, I don't know, like that seems like a pretty good deal right there. So, again, we'll see what happens. There's still a lot of offseason left. There's still a lot of kind of like, what is his actual role going to be? Like, where's he going to fit? How are they going to maximize him? But shoot, man, like when you get him going in the right direction, like he does flash. And so if you can just kind of increase the level of that production, of that kind of that variance that he brings in a positive way. And I think Darrell Tapp, he does a great job. You watch him do drills, pre-practice, you kind of see his energy, you see the things he's coaching. This could be a really nice fit for him where it's like, hey man, just get off and go. Shut your brain off, let this rip and go get after it. big, fast, athletic dudes. If you get the right coach, they can make you work, and in the right scheme, they can make you work too. Now, I agree with you. It's not a guaranteed 100% hit. There's a little bit of there's risk associated with it for sure. But if it does hit, man, you look like a genius.
And if it misses, I'm not gonna say who cares. 15 million is not nothing, but it's not something that like you are so screwed. How could you like? It's not a
Right.
contract that's gonna be like crazy prohibitive moving forward. All right, a couple of other quick news items on the way out here. Take Command essentially live here on the Hoffman Show. Logan is with me, of course, Greg Hoffman, the host of this here radio program on the Team 980. Let's just do like a quick minute on. I'm gonna like do say there's 5 other news items that are all Commanders adjacent. 3 guys that are coming back, 2 guys that are leaving. Bobby Wagner, you and I haven't had a chance to talk about this yet, but we can actually clump him and Zach Ertz together because to me, they're the same. They are force multipliers, guys that make everyone in that building better. And while they are not the best they've ever been, and they are not the best currently at their position, they are still very good football players that can help you right now. And I think they got really solid value, frankly, for both of them. Like fair market value, good deal for player, good deal for team. And that's the kind of thing that you want. Hey, you play well, we're going to bring you back. You're a great citizen, we're going to bring you back. And that's what they did with both these guys.
I totally agree, man. And I think when you talk about like kind of the influx of new pieces, whether it's in free agency, obviously Laramie and Javon are coming here, right? You need those pillars, those leadership pillars, guys you can point to and say, hey, you guys are all new, but that's a Hall of Fame middle linebacker right there. And look how he does it, right? Look at the way he practices. Look at the way he studies. Look at the way he preps. Look at the way Zach preps, man. I mean, holy cow, like to get him at the number that they got him at, I thought was excellent, right? Because he was so good last year. But to get that leadership back offensively, another year of mentorship, anybody in that offense, specifically Ben Sinnott, I think is fantastic. So to your point, it's exactly what you want, and I think it's essential for the cultural elements of this team moving forward, which is so important, per Dan Quinn and Adam Peters.
For sure. All right, next guy is your tight end, tight end brethren, John Bates. Logan, as the king of the wide tight end in Washington media, you are a happy man with John Bates returning. Why?
I mean, to say I'm happy is an understatement. I'm ecstatic, man. Like he like his value is never going to show up on a stat sheet, but to get that physical, tough, smart football player back in the building. Last year, the number one blocking Y went like $3 million. Like it's a valuable position in the NFL. People want this in their offense. So to get a guy homegrown, good length, good size, good understanding of run schemes, can compete with big defensive ends in line. Like this does so much for your run scheme. It elevates tremendously. And again, it's not going to show up in the stat sheet, but it'll show up in the rushing totals at the end of the year, the pass protection numbers at the end of the year. And I just love the way he preps and the way he prepares. And to get him and Zach back in the same room is fantastic.
No doubt about that. And now the pressure's on for Sinnott, but I also think that like tight end in the draft could be possible for them. So we'll see. That's certainly something we'll be monitoring on Take Command and on the Hoffman Show. All right, 2 guys that are exiting. One is, I think, fairly surprising. We'll start there. Jeremy Chinn was a guy that I thought they would definitely try to bring back. He ultimately signs a 2-year deal with the Raiders at a number is about $8 million per year. That is not crazy. Safety, there actually are some good players available, and the safety market was super weird last year as well. But what do you make of them letting Chinn out the door, and what options either internally? I feel like you're a little higher on Percy Butler than I am. Tyler Owens is floating around, but then you also have some guys, whether it's a big ticket item like a Javon Holland or some guys down the list that could be really interesting. And what do you think they're looking for to replace Jeremy Chinn?
Yeah, so I think you bring up a great point. I think there's a lot of bodies that have shown that they can get it done at a high level in the building. Like Percy Butler Derek Forrest is a guy that comes to mind too. Dominique Hampton comes to mind. Tyler Owens, once he figures it out, right? Like they've got some big. Ben Nichols is a big guy in practice squad, but they've got this big body archetype in the building. And so I look at that and I say, okay, there's people here that can get it done. They're maybe not as well as Jeremy could, but they've got talent in the building that they can develop, right? I look at the free agent. It's saturated with people. I know it's kind of a down year for edge rushers, defensive tackles, offensive line, running back, things that we've talked about, but it's saturated, and there's some really good football players in there. So maybe we get a guy that fits at a better price point, especially if we're making some of these big financial moves. We got to be a little bit wise with how we're spending money. And then look at the draft, and there are some absolute dogs in this draft to play the safety position. So to me, this is not an indictment of Jeremy Chinn. I think they did the right thing. Let him go out, test the market. He says, I got this. You say, we're not, quite frankly, we're not willing to pay that. That's not an indictment of what you did for us. It's just we want to invest these assets in other areas. I think it's also important to understand, man, safety by NFL standards is not a premium position, right?
Right.
It's not a premium position. They don't affect the play on every single down. So you can get away with kind of, hey, bargain bin shopping, finding the right fit for you. So that's what I'd say about that. Obviously, we're bummed to see Jeremy Chin leave. He's a great asset for this team last year. Great to see him kind of resurge and get back to the level he was known for in Carolina. But I think the guys in house, the guys in the draft, the guys in free agency are the reason that he's walking, basically.
Yeah, definitely, and they've got options now. We'll see which one they go. Defoe's a great call, by the way. You almost forget that he's around, but this is a starting caliber safety a couple of years ago, and showed last year in some fill-in spots that he still can play at a high level. That maybe he's not too indifferent from Chin, and maybe they saw that not enough to replace Jeremy last year, but they're like, if we got to, we'll see if Defoe can get on that page or if he's in the mix coming up when practice opens for OTAs in a couple months. All right, last but not least, Dyami Brown, Jacksonville, $10 million. That is a number I certainly would have been willing to pay. He might have liked the role in Jacksonville better. They might think they can do better. There are definitely options available in free agency. Guys like Darius Slayton. They've got Noah Brown they could bring back, who was ahead of Dyami on the depth chart, obviously, last year until he got hurt. But Dyami ultimately, good for him, man. $10 million if he goes and balls out in Jacksonville in a system, by the way, that I think is going to be very good to him. He can play off of Brian Thomas Jr. We saw how well he played off of Terry last year, and Liam Cohen might be the best screen designer in the league, and we saw how good Dyami was on that. So good for Dyami. But where does this leave the Commanders, and what do you make of that move?
I mean, this is one of the issues, right? When you do well and a young player does well, especially going into the playoffs, especially with a guy who's got some vertical juice, man, those guys are hard to find. You know what I mean? And I know receivers are kind of a dime a dozen now, but good for him, man. He played well when he needed to play well. And I'm sure that the Commanders it feels to me like Dyami wanted a 1-year prove-it deal. I would assume the Commanders wanted to tie him into something longer. I don't know that for sure. That's just my thought. And again, this is probably the right situation for him. So good on you. I think there's other opportunities as well. I think you look at what Zacchaeus did last year, what Noah Brown did last year. Were they as effective as Dyami late in the season? No, but are they still effective pros, and can they get the job done at a high level? Yes. And we talk about this all the time, Craig. As much as receiver is an appreciating asset if you're in that kind of top 10 group in the NFL, there are a ton of receivers in the draft that are really good football players that can do what you need a player like this to do. And I understand we have depreciating draft assets in terms of number. However, I look at this and say, there are guys. You can find a guy opposite Terry McLaurin to supplement Deebo Samuel that does whatever they need you to do, and you can find your type, pick them out, and say, this is going to be our guy. And so, again, I was looking at receivers a couple weeks ago for the draft, and I'm like, there's a kid from Nebraska who's no one talking about. He'll be available in the 6th round. Take him. He's going to run. He ran a 4.4. He's 6'5". He's 220. No one's talking about him, right? So you can find those pieces in the draft, develop. He's not going to be the number one target getter, and I understand that. But I would just say receiver's funny that way. And good for Dyami to get the contract, but there's other opportunities, other assets, and I think that's probably the direction Adam Peters is going.
Yeah, it's important not to confuse familiarity with goodness, and I think sometimes we all do that. We know this guy, but there's other guys out there that we don't know that will be just fine, and if they come here, we'll know them next year and not want them to leave, because that's how this goes. All right, that is the first ever Take Command live, essentially, podcast on the radio. It's just us talking football. It's no different than what we do when we record it. Just we can't cuss and bleep it out later because we're live on the radio. That's Logan Paulson, everybody. Of course, you know him. He played 10 years in the NFL, and we do our pod a couple times a week. We'll probably do more podding if news breaks, so make sure you subscribe to Take Command wherever you get your podcast. Logan, appreciate you, sir. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on, man. Great show.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate you. When we get back live here on the radio, we will basically wrap up the show because we got a lot of commercials we got to play because we did a wacky bit there where we went commercial free. We'll figure all that out. But first, the latest in the world of women's sports presented to you by Wawa. Chicken how you wanna at Wawa with customizable crispy and roasted chicken sandwiches. All right, we're wrapping up here on the Hoffman Show. Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. I think that went pretty well, Anthony. All things considered.
No, I did.
Logan, live with us through technology that was giving us a little bit of a hard time, but hopefully y'all didn't notice too much. I did get some complaints because Logan's face wasn't on the live stream. There will be a version of that is more visually appealing with take command graphics and Logan's face actually in it. Someone was like, "Quit nodding your head, Craig." I had to show Logan I was paying attention. You just listen and you pay attention to Professor Paulson. You stop looking at me. Guy in the YouTube stream. Buddy old pal. So if I had told you, Anthony, at 3:54 today that we'd spend most of our show on Laramie Tunsil, what would you have said to me?
You're crazy. I really thought today's show was going to be about Javon Kinlaw, and I knew something was going to. I thought maybe Jeremy Chinn gets re-signed or
something.
Yes, something along those lines was going to break during our show, and it really did break during our show. Like 4 p.m. Like they knew he was coming on.
If we were joking with Russell right before the show that about like what time he ended his show, which it should end roughly at 3:56 if we're going to start at 4 on the dot. I'm not that mad when he ends at 3:58. Now, when Chris decides to come back and do Dum Dum at the Day starting at 3:58, then I'm like, buddy, pal, you're killing me. But today, because he did a 3:58 bit, meaning we were going to start around 4:02, we had an extra minute to wholly S ourselves, as opposed to me opening the show and then it happening as I was already in the segment and you being like, hey!
Yep. That's precisely
Stop talking about Javon Kinlaw.
Yeah.
Something more important, all due respect, is happening. We didn't talk about anything else today. Dude, there was so much stuff that happened this weekend with DK and Gino, and we didn't talk about Darnold today. I can't wait for tomorrow to talk about all the stuff we missed today.
We ain't talk about Miles.
We didn't talk about Myles Garrett. On Friday, the owner of the Browns declined a meeting with Myles Garrett. Okay, that's where the relationship was on Friday. And then by Sunday, they'd signed him to $40 million a year.
Insane, man.
Crazy. We have good stuff for real things, or
we got a funny. We have Kevin Hart, and then we also have Matt Painter.
Oh, the Matt Painter. I mean, all due respect to Kevin
The
Hart.
Matt Painter is too long, though.
Okay.
It's like, I want to say it's like 3 minutes.
The Matt Painter one's incredible.
2 minutes. It's 2 minutes, actually.
Because it reminds us how little most of us know, unless you, like, really speak basketball or football or whatever. He really starts. It's better with the visual when you send it to me because I was able to follow along. Because, like, I know all this stuff. It's just, like, sometimes it gets mixed around in my head. Are we spanning the pick and roll? Are we exiting? Are we doing this? Are we doing that? Credit to the people that put it all together. We'll have to try to play that one tomorrow.
Yeah.
Honestly, we might just skip. I think we deserve a little Kevin Hart funny business on the way out. Let's do it.
Real things.
We're not going to be so this year.
Real people.
5-11, not very good.
Set into real microphones.
The culture is actually damn good.
All right, Anthony, what's the setup here for old Kevin Hart?
All right, so Kev was on the Jennifer Hudson show, and she said she saw him at the All-Star game.
Oh, WNBA All-Star game? Or no, the NBA All-Star game when the W Stars were next to him.
Yes.
This will go well.
I just saw you at the NBA All-Star game.
Yes.
What in the world? Okay, and then my favorite part was you and Shaq standing.
Yeah.
We can't even see who in the photo. Kevin,
Well, that's
what
how
happened?
I take pictures. That's how I take pictures with tall people. So I have a rule, right? Yeah.
Oh my God!
Yeah. Anybody taller than me, when you take a photo, your head is off. If you aren't, yeah. That's me and Steph right there.
Oh, so you know who you're in the picture?
I know who they are. If the people don't see the picture, that's not my business.
Okay.
You can see me. You can clearly see where I'm at. But it's just a rule. I'm not dealing with tall people, okay? If you want to come around me and you expect me to look up and do all this stuff, I'm not inconveniencing myself or my world.
Yes.
So when you come into my domain, it is what it is.
Okay.
Your head is off. Yeah, see, that's a stupid picture. See?
That's the picture you was talking about with the WNBA.
And then they show the W one with Cam Brink and all them.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Come into my world. Kevin. Hey, now, Kevin, is that your world down there?
I get that treatment sometimes.
You ain't as short as Kevin Hart.
No, I'm not.
You know what else? We ain't as rich as Kevin Hart either, so we can all have our stuff. That's our show. We'll have much more on NFL free agency tomorrow. Heat Wizards, 15 minutes.